I mean, basically toxic combinations are, when an identity starts off with a certain set of permissions and then through various means gets another set of permissions. And when those two things come together, they then give the identity more permission than was intended for. Now, that's a very textbook type answer. So, maybe I can talk about it in terms of a real world example that I see all the time. A lot of times you see toxic combinations start, quite classically where an employee of the company starts in one role and they have a certain set of permissions. And then maybe they move up in the role and they gain more permissions. And then maybe they move to a different role or a different group and those old permissions aren't taken away, but they're now given a new set of permissions as well. And when you put those permission sets together, that employee might have access to or be able to do stuff more than they were ever intended. So that's really the classic case. But then you get the cases in the cloud where you have your people identities such as your users, and then we have these non-people identities such as your AWS roles or your service principals or what have you in the other clouds, and where you might grant, say, a user or a non-person identity the ability to assume another role or use one of these non-people identities. And now that first identity then gains the permission of the second one. And what we see a lot of is we see a lot of this permission chaining. Well, you can gain access to this one, but then this one gives me access to gain access to this one, and it gives me access to this VM. And all along the way, you're sort of picking up these different permission sets. And somewhere in there, there's a really bad combination of you can do X, Y, and now Z, and that can cause a lot of problem in your cloud. So in essence, that's what a toxic combination is. Some consequences of toxic combinations really, again, you end up with an identity that has far more permission than was ever designed for. And so that's kind of a given. But like a lot of what I've seen, a lot of what I talk to people about is they don't see that. They don't think that that identity has that much permission. So one of the consequences that happens in the cloud is it's an unknown. You think that the user, Eric, only can do the thing within the scope of my role, but what you don't understand is Eric can now assume a non-person identity or use a VM to do something else. And so what it really creates is it creates these blind spots in your risk management, in your actual cloud security. And that's one of the biggest consequences that I see. You're also not looking because you don't know about them. You're not looking for them. So then you get blind spots in your monitoring. You get blind spots in your security operation. So again, other than just having more permissions than was designed for, you get these other blind spots, and really you've got maybe a security leader saying, "Yeah, we're good. We understand what we see," but out here there's all this risk that they don't see, and that's a huge consequence. And also, if you look at any of the breaches that happen in the cloud, like most of the time, that's why that happened, because they weren't even aware of this risk over there. Effective permissions, yeah, I get this question a lot. The most basic way that I talk about effective permissions is the end-to-end permission of an identity. We've talked about toxic combinations and how those occur. And so what happens is you get an identity that might have the ability to do other things. It might have the ability to access other identities, other services, other resources in the cloud. And every time it is able to do that, it picks up a new permission set. So it's like bolting on permissions. So when you look at the first identity, on the surface, it might look like it has the ability to not very much. But through all of the permission chaining that it gets, or the end-to-end permission, that's the effective permission. So it might mean an identity that looks like it can't do anything through the effective permissions can jump from a development environment into a production environment, access a data store, and take actions on that. So Sonrai stops and prevents toxic combinations through a multi-step process. Number one, we inventory all of the identities in your cloud, and we're doing this continuously. So we have an up-to-date inventory in your cloud. But really at the heart of it is our graphing technology and our patented analytics, where we take every single identity and we compute the end-to-end or effective permissions of every single identity. So we understand what every single identity can do in your cloud completely. And then from there, we add more analytics to rank those identities, to understand those combinations, those toxic combinations, which ones are really, really bad. And we bubble the ones up to the top that are the worst for you to go address. So instead of trying to address 5,000 problems in your cloud, we say, hey, here's 5 identities that are really, really bad. They've got some really toxic combinations. Go address them first. So it's great to find, a bunch of problems in the cloud, and a lot of tools do this. But, as security teams know, they're overwhelmed by alerts. We call it alert fatigue. And so where Sonrai helps is not only by finding the problems and prioritizing them, but giving you the tools and the mechanisms to remediate them, as I like to say, at the speed and the scale of the cloud. So we help you logically break up your environment, your cloud environment, into areas that make sense to you. And then we give you the tools to integrate with third-party applications, your ticketing tools, to really leverage the processes and the people that you already have in your business to solve these problems in the cloud. And above all of that, what's so great about the cloud is automation. That's what makes the cloud awesome. That's what all these developers, that's what all these organizations are doing. We give you the ability to use automation in the security space to, again, fix the problems at the speed and the scale of the cloud. If a really bad thing is found, do you really want a ticket to go sit in someone's bucket for a week, or do you want that thing to be remediated automatically? We can run automation and workflows to do that, so those problems get solved when they're found, not just waiting around for someone to pick up a ticket.